Joni Lamb has faced criticism before, but nothing prepared her for this moment. In a chilling twist, respected pastors delivered warnings so direct, so terrifying, that even she, always steady on camera, couldn't hold back the tears. What did they say that shook her to her core? And why are so many convinced these warnings are more than words but a prophetic message about her future? The emotion, the fear, and the fallout are sending shockwaves through the Christian community. When Marcus Lamb passed away in November 2021, the entire Christian world seemed to pause. He had been the face and the driving force behind Daystar, and his death left not only his family but also millions of viewers grieving. People expected his widow, Joni, to walk through a long season of mourning, to take time to heal, and to honor the memory of the man she had spent decades beside. For a while, it looked like she was doing just that. She appeared somber, reflective, and surrounded by her children. Many assumed this would be a slow journey, filled with pain but also with the grace and patience that often follows such a loss. But only months later, whispers began to spread. In May 2022, Joni was suddenly linked to Dr. Doug Weiss, a Christian psychologist who had once counseled the Lamb family. At first, it was described as friendship. Then, it quickly turned into something more. By July, the two were openly dating, and by June 2023, they were married. The timeline left people stunned. To those on the outside, it looked as if Joni had barely paused before stepping into a brand new chapter, one that many felt came far too soon. For supporters of Daystar, the quick marriage was jarring. They had watched Marcus and Joni together for years, believing their relationship was built not only on love, but also on faith and shared purpose. Now, within a year and a half of Marcus's passing, Joni was standing beside another man, smiling in wedding photos. Many felt confused, even betrayed. Was this truly love, or was it a way of filling the empty space Marcus left behind? And if it was love, had there been enough time to honor the grief, the loss, and the family's pain? Inside the Christian community, the reaction was sharp. Some defended Joni, saying no one has the right to judge another person's grief. Others, though, argued that, as a leader in such a visible ministry, her choices carried extra weight. To them, the marriage didn't look like healing, it looked like rushing. And for a woman in her position, that rush felt like it sent the wrong message about patience, discernment, and faith. It wasn't just gossip. For many, it shook their trust. They had expected to see strength and mourning from a leader who had spent decades teaching about faith through trials. Instead, they saw what felt like a quick escape. That's why the marriage wasn't just personal. It became a public moment of shock, one that continues to divide those who once followed Joni closely. When Joni Lamb remarried so quickly after the death of her husband Marcus, the shock didn't only hit the Christian community watching from the outside. The deepest pain was felt inside her own family. Her children, who were already carrying the grief of losing their father, suddenly found themselves struggling with something they never expected: the sense that their mother was moving forward without them, leaving them behind in the shadow of a decision they could barely understand. Jonathan Lamb, Marcus and Joni's son, carried much of that weight on his shoulders. For years, he had stood in his father's footsteps, helping with the ministry, learning how to lead, and carrying the burden of being part of a family that was always under the public eye. Marcus's death had already left him devastated, but he tried to stay strong for his wife Susie, his siblings, and the Daystar community that looked to him for leadership. Then came the news of his mother's relationship with Doug Weiss. It wasn't whispered rumors anymore. It was real, and it was fast. Jonathan felt blindsided. In a heartfelt letter to his mother, Jonathan poured out his pain. He didn't write with the voice of a leader or a public figure. He wrote as a grieving son. He explained how hurt he was by her decision, how unprepared he felt for such a sudden change, and how disregarded he and Susie felt, as though their voices didn't matter. The letter revealed wounds deeper than just disagreement. It showed a rift in the family, a sense of betrayal that was hard to put into words. Jonathan wasn't only grieving the loss of his father. Now, he felt like he was losing his mother too, not to death, but to choices that seemed to push the family further apart. For Susie, the pain was personal in a different way. As Jonathan's wife, she had always stood by him, watching the heavy burden that came with being part of the Lamb legacy. She had seen his quiet struggles, his private tears, and his attempts to stay strong for everyone else. When Joni moved forward so quickly, Susie felt it as a blow to the family's unity. She had hoped for time to heal, for space where they could walk together in grief. But instead, she felt as though the family was being forced into a new reality without any say. The other children felt the sting as well. Grief is already complicated, But when the parent who is left behind chooses a new path so soon, it can feel like the memory of the one who died is being overshadowed. For Marcus's children, it wasn't only about their mother's happiness, it was about the legacy their father left behind. They worried that his values, his years of dedication to Daystar, and the family name itself were being set aside for something new and unfamiliar. What hurt the most wasn't only the speed of the remarriage, but the feeling that their concerns didn't matter. Jonathan revealed that when he tried to express his worries, he was met with resistance, even threats of being pushed aside from family responsibilities. Instead of being invited into the conversation, he felt silenced. The pain of losing his father was now compounded by the pain of feeling unheard by his mother. Behind closed doors, the family's grief turned into division. Moments that should have been about healing together became moments filled with tension and mistrust. For children who once looked to their mother as a source of stability, her choices now left them questioning where they belonged in her new light. The weight of all this went beyond family dinners or private conversations. It spilled into the ministry itself. Daystar was built not only on Marcus and Joni's leadership, but also on the image of a strong, united family standing on faith. With cracks appearing so publicly, supporters of the ministry could see the strain, and for the Lamb children, it wasn't just about the network. It was about the heartache of feeling their family slip away. The pain of the children was raw, complicated, and hard to heal. They weren't asking their mother to stay in mourning forever, but they longed for her to honor their father's memory with patience and discernment, to give the family space to grieve together before making such life-changing decisions. Instead, the quick remarriage left them reeling, carrying wounds that might take years to mend. For Jonathan, Susie, and the others, the struggle was more than just about timing. It was about love, respect, and family loyalty. They wanted to believe their family bond was unshakable, that even in the darkest seasons, they could stand together. But as the months passed, the division became a painful reminder that grief doesn't just take away, it can also divide. And for the children of Marcus and Joni, that division cut deeper than anyone on the outside could ever truly understand. When news of Joni Lamb's quick remarriage spread through the Christian community, the reaction wasn't just quiet whispers among church members. Pastors, leaders, and longtime friends of the Lamb family began to speak up. Some did it privately, through letters and phone calls. Others went public, posting their concerns online or preaching about it from pulpits. The message they carried was the same. Something felt wrong about the speed of this new marriage, and it wasn't only about family feelings. They feared it was a spiritual mistake, one that could have consequences for Joni, her family, and even the Daystar network. One of the first voices to rise was Pastor Valerie Hartwell, a woman who knew Joni well and had walked a similar road of grief herself. She wrote to Joni with a heavy heart, reminding her of the biblical call to mourn, to wait, and to let God heal wounds before stepping into something new. Valerie's words weren't sharp or cruel. They came from experience. She understood what it meant to lose a husband and the deep loneliness that followed. But she also knew how dangerous it could be to fill that emptiness too quickly. In her letter, she pleaded with Joni to slow down, to make sure the decision wasn't being driven by emotions, but by true spiritual guidance. Others soon joined her. Pastors who had once preached alongside Marcus Lamb, who had partnered with Daystar for years, began to express their unease. They didn't question Joni's right to find love again someday, but they questioned the timing. Barely a year had passed since Marcus's death. To them, the marriage to Doug Weiss felt rushed, almost like skipping a chapter in a book. They warned that grief, if ignored, could come back later in ways even more painful, not only for Joni, but for her family. The criticism wasn't only about personal healing. Many leaders worried about the message it sent to the wider Christian community. Daystar wasn't just any ministry. It was one of the largest Christian networks in the world, a platform that had shaped faith for millions. To see its leader remarry so quickly raised questions of integrity and discernment. What example does this set for others, some pastors asked? If leaders didn't show patience in grief, if they didn't allow God's timing to unfold, how could ordinary believers be expected to do the same? Doug Weiss's role in the story added another layer of concern. As a marriage counselor with his own complex history, including a divorce, Doug was already a figure some considered controversial. For pastors who cared deeply about biblical principles, this felt troubling. They questioned whether he was the right partner for Joni, especially at such a vulnerable time. Some even feared that his influence could shift the focus of Daystar, taking it away from the values Marcus had built and pulling it towards something more personal, less grounded in the faith community's trust. As weeks passed, more leaders began to speak openly. On Christian radio shows, in newsletters, and on social media, they raised alarms about the spiritual danger of rushing into marriage after deep loss. They warned that loneliness can cloud judgment, that the need for comfort can sometimes silence the voice of God. Some even used strong language, calling the marriage a deception, a trap that could lead not just to personal struggles, but to public failure. The warnings weren't easy to give. Many of these leaders respected Joni deeply. They had prayed with her, worked with her, and admired her strength during Marcus's life and ministry. But that was exactly why they felt the need to speak now. To stay silent, they believed, would be to watch a sister in Christ walk into trouble without trying to stop her. Their tone wasn't always soft. Some words sounded harsh. But beneath it was a deep concern, a fear that Joni was moving too quickly down a road she might one day regret. The letters, sermons, and posts caused ripples across the Christian world. Supporters of Joni defended her, saying she was simply following God's will and choosing joy after a season of heartbreak. But the pastors and leaders who raised their voices insisted it wasn't about denying her happiness. It was about timing, wisdom, and the need for true healing. They reminded people that leadership carries a responsibility, that every choice is magnified when millions are watching. In homes, churches, and online groups, believers wrestled with the warnings. Some saw them as proof that Joni was being reckless. Others thought the pastors were being too harsh, not allowing her the freedom to move on. But one thing was clear: the alarm had been sounded. This wasn't just gossip. It was a real and serious concern among respected voices in the faith community. For Joni, the weight of those warnings must have been heavy. To have strangers question her choices is one thing, but to hear pastors and friends, people she had trusted for years, plead with her to reconsider, that carried a different kind of pain. Yet she pressed forward with Doug, standing by her decision even as the alarms grew louder. The story of those warnings is more than just about a marriage. It is about the role of leaders in times of grief, the balance between personal desire and spiritual responsibility, and the courage it takes for others to speak up when they believe someone they love is walking into danger. Whether Joni chose to listen or not, the pastors and leaders who sounded the alarm made sure their voices were heard, leaving behind a reminder that in the world of ministry, choices are never just personal. They echo through families, congregations, and communities of faith. When Marcus Lamb passed away, Daystar felt like it had lost not just a leader, but its heartbeat. For decades, Marcus had been the face and voice of the network, carrying it from a small idea into one of the biggest Christian broadcasters in the world. His sudden death left a gap that everyone felt: his family, his staff, and the millions who tuned in every week. In that moment, people looked to Joni Lamb, his widow, to steady the ship. She was strong, seasoned, and well-known. For many, it seemed natural that she would carry the vision forward. But what started as a season of transition quickly became a storm of questions, criticism, and deep uncertainty. Joni's decision to remarry so quickly after Marcus's passing shocked not just her family, but the wider Christian community. For supporters of Daystar, the marriage to Doug Weiss didn't feel like a private matter. It felt like something that touched the ministry itself. To them, Daystar had always been about family values, faith, and the idea that spiritual leaders should model patience, humility, and discernment. When Joni stepped into a new marriage less than 2 years after Marcus's death, many saw it as a move that undermined the very foundation Daystar had been built on. Inside the ministry, staff members began to whisper. Some wondered if donors would pull back. Others questioned whether Joni's personal decisions were now guiding the direction of the network more than the mission Marcus had started. What had once been a ministry focused on the gospel now risked being seen as a platform for personal choices. The fear wasn't just about bad press. It was about losing the trust that Daystar had carefully built over decades. Trust is everything in ministry. People who gave their money, time, and prayers to Daystar weren't just investing in a television channel. They believed they were investing in eternity, in spreading the word of God to places they couldn't reach themselves. That trust came from Marcus and Joni presenting themselves as faithful stewards, people who lived what they preached. The controversy surrounding Joni's remarriage cracked that trust wide open. Suddenly, viewers were asking themselves uncomfortable questions. Was this about ministry or about personal gain? Were donations funding God's work, or were they being used to support lifestyles and choices that didn't reflect the values preached on air? The family division only deepened the problem. When Jonathan Lamb, Marcus and Joni's son, shared his heartbreak in a letter about his mother's decision, it wasn't just a family matter anymore. It became public. His words revealed a deep wound, one that showed the family itself was not united. For a ministry like Daystar, built on the image of family and faith, this was devastating. People had tuned in for years to see a family united in purpose. Now, that picture was fractured, and supporters couldn't ignore it. Pastors and Christian leaders began to weigh in, and their voices carried weight. Some, like Pastor Valerie Hartwell, warned openly that Joni's decisions showed a lack of spiritual discernment. Others quietly distanced themselves from Daystar, refusing to appear on programs or hesitating to associate their ministries with the network. For a platform that had thrived on partnerships and unity across denominations, this was a serious blow. Without the support of respected leaders, Daystar risked losing its credibility in the very circles it had once dominated. The financial strain soon followed. Ministries like Daystar rely heavily on donations, and donors give when they feel they can trust the mission. But as the controversy grew, many supporters pulled back. Some stopped giving altogether. Others redirected their donations to churches or ministries they felt were more transparent. For Daystar, this was not just about losing a little money. It was about losing the foundation that kept the network alive. Every program, every broadcast, every missionary trip depended on those funds. Without them, the future looked shaky. Meanwhile, critics outside the Christian community began to circle. For years, skeptics had accused televangelist networks of misusing funds or prioritizing personal wealth over genuine ministry. The drama surrounding Joni and Doug seemed to confirm their suspicions. Articles appeared in Christian and secular outlets alike, questioning whether Daystar was still what it claimed to be. Negative headlines weren't new for Daystar, but this time felt different. This time, the criticism was fueled not just by outsiders, but by insiders, family, pastors, and longtime supporters. And then there was Doug Weiss himself. His background as a counselor, along with his own complicated history, made him a lightning rod for criticism. Supporters questioned whether he was the right partner for Joni, whether his influence might steer the ministry in directions it was never meant to go. Some even worried aloud that Daystar was slowly shifting away from Marcus's legacy into something unrecognizable. The idea of a new vision wasn't necessarily bad, but the way it was happening so quickly, so controversially, made people uneasy. Inside Daystar's offices, the tension grew. Staff who had once felt proud to be part of something bigger than themselves now wondered if their jobs were secure. Whispers of declining donations, strained relationships, and uncertain leadership filled the halls. For a ministry that had once been marked by energy and momentum, the atmosphere was now heavy with doubt. Some employees quietly updated their resumes, unsure if Daystar would even survive in its current form. All of this painted a troubling picture, a ministry at risk, not just because of finances or leadership struggles, but because of broken trust. Once trust is lost, it is almost impossible to regain. Supporters who felt betrayed by Joni's decisions weren't easily swayed by explanations or reassurances. They wanted transparency, accountability, and a clear sign that Daystar was still about spreading the gospel rather than protecting personal choices. Without that, they saw no reason to keep supporting. Yet even in the middle of the storm, some people continued to defend Joni. They argued that she was human, that she had every right to find happiness again, and that her decisions didn't erase the good that Daystar had done over the years. These voices, though loyal, were drowned out by the louder chorus of critics. For every supporter, there seemed to be 10 more raising concerns, asking hard questions, or simply walking away. Daystar's future now hangs in the balance. Can it rebuild trust? Can it recenter on its mission and remind viewers why they supported it in the first place? Or will the controversy prove too much, leaving the ministry as a shadow of what it once was? Those are the questions being asked, not just by viewers, but by pastors, partners, and even the Lamb family itself. What once felt unshakable now feels fragile. A ministry that reached millions across the world is at risk of collapsing under the weight of mistrust, family division, and leadership choices that many believe were made too quickly. For Joni, the challenge is immense. Every word she speaks, every decision she makes, will either rebuild or further erode the legacy Marcus left behind. For the staff, the donors, and the faithful viewers, the waiting game is painful. They want to believe, they want to trust again, But trust once broken is hard to restore. The story of Daystar, right now, is not just about a marriage or a family drama. It is about what happens when personal choices collide with public ministry, when the lines between private life and public responsibility blur. It is about how quickly decades of work can be undone if the foundation of trust cracks. And unless something changes soon, Daystar may not just be a ministry in crisis, it may be a ministry at risk of losing everything.